Financial technology could promote the opening up, innovation and development of a country's financial market, while it could also bring a lot of risks, including illegal cross-border financial activities. As major economies have jumped to embrace blockchain, a controversial technology that became a hot topic over the week after the Chinese leadership decided to strengthen investment in the area. How will financial innovations affect our daily life? What does the digital currency mean for the financial sector? And how will competitions over financial technologies reshape the global monetary order? To discuss these and other issues, I'm very happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Yao Yang, Director of the China Center for Economic Research and the National School of Development at Peking University. From the same university, we have Professor Paul Gillis. He's a professor of practice at Peking University. We'll also speak to Professor Jun Qian, Executive Dean of Fanhai International School of Finance at Fudan University in Shanghai via satellite. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue. Now, Professor Yao Yang, you just came back from Shanghai where you attended a very important financial seminar on the future of a blockchain, digital currency in particular. Can you brief us very quickly on the atmosphere and the messages that participants delivered in the exchange of opinions?
Well, I think there are two hot topics of the forum. One is that because the global economy is in the face of another recession, so major countries, major central banks probably are going to do another round of QE. That's going to have a huge implication for both the economy and the financial market. The other hot topic is that probably the Central Bank of China is going to issue its own digital currency. People have been discussing this very hotly and with a lot of expectations.
American leadership has been discussing the impact of the Chinese primacy in digital technology. In fact, our war on 5G, Huawei, blah, blah, you could mention it, could be part of this competition between major economies. What do you think of the strong possibility that our Chinese central bank would be the first among all other major economies to issue digital currency? And what does that mean for the American financial leadership?
Well, I think it's very likely that China will issue a digital currency before the U.S. does. And the reason for that is that the government here is behind it, whereas I think the government in the U.S. is going to be very skeptical about digital currency. They're going to be afraid of losing control of the currency, of illegal activities that might take place, and their regulation process in the U.S. is much slower than it is in China.
Zuckerberg, a leader of and founder of Facebook, attended the congressional hearing trying to clarify the importance and necessity of using Libra the world over. Do you believe lawmakers have been persuaded?
I don't think that Zuckerberg made a very compelling case for Libra in those hearings, and I indicated that unless he could bring Congress around, that they probably wouldn't issue it.
Thank you so much. Let me cross over to Professor Jun Qian, who's standing by in Shanghai. And we would love to hear what he has to say on the importance of a digital currency. Professor Jun Qian, did you follow very closely the results of the just concluded financial conference in Bandung, Waitan in Shanghai? What could you tell us?
Yes, I did follow the conference. Obviously, digital currency is a very hot issue. So I would like to add to the discussion in that, in general, who issues the currency matters too. So in China, the discussion has been that the central bank is planning on issuing a digital currency. And in the U.S., up to this point, it's a private company, Facebook, doing it. One can argue that having a private company issuing a currency, if it's a true currency that's in widely circulation, there might be some issues because it might interfere with the government's macro monetary policy. So in that aspect, if you instead have the central bank of a country to issue the digital currency, then what you can do is you can combine the benefits of a digital currency, but having the central bank be the issuer, then the central bank can obviously internalize the issuance, the amount of the digital currency along with the existing currency system. So in that regard, from the perspective of financial system and macro policy, technology aside, you can argue that having the central bank being the issuer is perhaps better.
Thank you very much, Yao Yang and Paul. My next question is very much about results of very tough debates that have been raging on for years concerning the role that the Chinese government plays in shaping our dynamics of the financial market. For example, the relationship between central bank and non-public sectors in the issue of digital currencies. In fact, our amount of online payment is almost 100 times the size of the US. That's very, very impressive. Does it mean, Yao Yang, that China will definitely assume leadership in reshaping the world financial order in the particular area of digital technology?
Well, look to me, as an economist, I really don't see any difference between the current form of currency and the digital currency issued by a central bank. It's just the same thing. For a long time, I think more than 10 years, we Chinese have been using digital currency every day. I mean, back to several years ago, I didn't use it, but today, every day, I have to use it. Right? It is a digital currency. You know, for us, money means what? Means just a bit in a computer network. It doesn't mean anything else, right? So it's already a digital currency. It's just for the central bank, it's not going to say, I'm going to issue this paperback to certain banks, right? I'm going to just transfer some bits to you. That's it. That's the only difference if a central bank issues the money.
No, I'm afraid there are big differences between the costs of traditional currency and that of the digital currency. For example, can we easily do cross-border transactions with online payment? And do you believe the use of blockchains would fix this problem in the near future?
Well, one of the advantages of digital currency could be in cross-border e-commerce because a company that was selling worldwide could price all of their goods in the digital currency. So the prices are the same everywhere in the world, and the transfers have become very transparent and fast.
It's a matter of efficiency. Yes, you're right. We could do it more quickly.
Yes. And possibly at a lower transaction cost. That is one of the supposed advantages of blockchain technologies, is that they will allow you to eliminate some of the middlemen who now get involved in financial transactions. You know, even here in China, where hardly anyone uses cash anymore, we all use Alipay or WeChat Pay, there's still a fee that's involved in there for Alipay and WeChat Pay to process those transactions. It gets paid. Now, arguably, with a digital currency, you might be able to avoid that middleman and have the payment go directly with no friction and no cost.
Let me go back to Professor Jun Qian. Do you foresee the prospect that the RMB cash will be marginalized with the pervasive use of Alipay and WeChat Pay?
First, let me clarify a point. When I talk about currency, I mean whether it's paper money or electronic coins that's in very wide circulation. To me, that's clearly different from a payment system. Okay, so what Alipay and Tencent Pay have been doing is they facilitate the clearances of transactions. That, to me, is not digital currency. A currency is one that can be exchanged for any and all kinds of services and goods within a country. You talked about this issue about, so that's the point I want to clarify. So when I said that it's better to have, one can argue, it's better to have the central bank to issue the digital currency, that's what I meant, okay? It's not just a payment system to facilitate trades or transactions. Now, for cross-border transactions, actually, there is an issue. We know that, for example, Ant Financial, which is affiliated with Alibaba, they are expanding overseas, but they're doing this one country at a time, right? They need to basically, I know that recently Alipay is allowed to do business in Hungary. I was there in March. So when you talk about cross-border transactions, money settlements, again, I think it's beyond. We need more than simply technology, this cryptocurrency. Once you're doing large-scale cross-border transactions, there needs to be some sort of coordination between institutions, between governments. So in that regard, I think that's another reason that you could have a means of exchange under some limited scenarios. Okay, you can have lots of examples where you can have some sort of a coin to exchange for some other services within that. In Chinese, we call that 场景 or platform. But to me, a digital currency is one that can serve the same function as the currency we're using, and that to me is quite different from Alipay and what Tencent Pay has been doing.
Let's take a second look at the broad picture concerning the collapse of the Bretton Woods in the early 1970s. And when you look at the consequences of reversing the nuclear deal in the Middle East about Iran, European economies and European politicians share the same concern that their multinationals are being punished by American domestic laws for the use of US dollars, and the very issue of SWIFT starts to capture headlines in Europe. Therefore, Europeans, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans have all shared, Russians share the same concern, whether, wishful thinking, quote unquote, in the near future they could create their own version of digital currencies to bypass SWIFTs, to minimize the costs of their transactions with the purchase state of Iran. Paul?
Yes, I mean, the U.S. has used the dominance of the dollar in international trade to its advantage in enforcing its policies against other countries. And oil is the great example of that, where oil is priced in dollars, and so they can say that if you want to buy Iranian oil, you can't do so because you can't use the U.S. banking system to make the payments. And so there's no way to pay. And that has been used quite effectively. Now, could a digital currency find a way around that? Possibly. That the price of oil could be denominated in digital currency if there was sufficient digital currency to take care of those volumes of transactions.
But let me add to this. Money actually has a huge scale economy. The world finally settled down just on one currency, which was the United States, US dollars. There is a reason behind it. This is because of the scale economy. If we use a digital currency, then one digital currency, probably liberal or something else, is going to dominate the world. And they are going to exercise exactly the same power in the whole world. We are not going to be able to break up this unless we are going to truly have an international government, a global government that issue a global currency.
When the Trump administration vows to put America first in what is called protectionism and unilateralism, Professor Jun Chan, do you think it is time for us to consider seriously the creation and issue of our own digital currency to bypass a world payment system that is actually based on the sovereignty of American, economy and its administration? What do you think of the feasibility that in the foreseeable future digital currencies, whatever the version, would be used widely to minimize the transaction costs because of our excessive reliance and dangerous reliance on the US dollar as a global payment system?
So first of all, I wholeheartedly agree in terms of the global payment and monetary system that it shouldn't be only one currency dominant. Having one dominant currency actually creates a lot of problems, as been discussed. So for example, in the current payment system, we know that there is a global monetary transaction settlement system called SWIFT, even though it's headquartered in Europe, but clearly it's dominated by U.S. because the largest institutions are doing the settlements are U.S. institutions. And that does create a lot of problems, not only for emerging markets, but also for European countries like France and Germany. So from the perspective of the traditional payment system and currency system, clearly we need multiple currencies just to actually stabilize the global payment system. Now, we've been talking about the role of the digital currency. Again, in my view, I can see sort of a narrow defined digital currency. By that, I mean that a means of exchange that under certain scenarios, for example, if all the parties agree when we exchange money for oil or some other commodities, if all parties agree something like a digital quote-unquote currency can be used, mutually agreed, then certainly that can be the new means of currency. But the problem for that is I cannot see that goes beyond simply among these interested parties or companies. At some point when the scale of this is large enough, you just know that governments will come and interfere. So I also agree that for this digital currency to be really the means of exchange, even in the scenario of oil, buying and selling oil, you do need a global coordination. Coordination among financial institutions, but certainly, if not explicit agreements on all the governments, at least all the governments are on board in terms of using something more than dollar or some other traditional currency.
Thank you very much,
so in
Paul
short, I
and
think there needs to be coordination.
Thank you very much, Jun Jiang. Everybody is talking about the reform of the WTO, national treatment and the level playing field. Perhaps the use of digital currency might help lay the groundwork of decentralizing the control of currencies. We've been talking about the primacy and the hegemonic nature of US dollar since the early 1970s, but digital issue is different from blockchain. I've noticed the differences, or policymakers in Beijing said over and over, look, these are two different issues. So let's look at blockchain. After all, this is the subject matter of our discussion today on Dialogue. Paul, what can you tell us about the basic definition concerning blockchain, so that not everybody understands clearly what the blockchain actually means for the performance of our economy?
Well, blockchain was invented about 20 years ago to facilitate the creation of Bitcoin. And what it is it's called a distributed ledger. And what it means is transactions are recorded basically in everybody's computer at pretty much the same time. So that everyone has a complete record of what has happened, and then the previous record can't be changed. And so that it preserves what has happened in the past. Now that's very important for a digital currency because it establishes that only one person owns this particular coin at a particular point in time, and once it's transferred it can't be undone and say, no, actually I didn't transfer that to you. No, it obviously did. The record shows that. But blockchain can be used for many things. And one of the applications that's been talked about a lot is to use it to avoid counterfeiting. So that if one of the problems around the world has been counterfeit parts, for example, for airplanes. You don't want to fly in an airplane that's had counterfeit parts that are put into it. So a part could be labeled in such a manner to be able to ensure that the part, as it hands through many hands on its way to the airplane, we can still be certain that the part that's installed is the part that was actually created by Airbus or by Boeing many hands before.
5 days ago, President Xi Jinping hosted a conference, a landmark conference on the importance of blockchain. In fact, observers, Chinese and foreign alike, were all caught unprepared about the importance that the Chinese authorities have attached to our economic performance, because obviously, undeniably, there are very serious competitions between the two biggest economies. You look at the tip of the trade war between Washington and Beijing, unilaterally, preemptively launched by Washington. So what do you think of the timing and the background against which President Xi spoke of the use of blockchain in China?
Well, I think the large background is that technological progress and AI technologies are developing really fast in China, and the Chinese government really want to upgrade its own technology. Blockchain can be applied in many scenarios, all right? So just name blockchain as kind of a catching word, right? It is going to have some significance. I think another background is that the central bank probably is going to issue its own digital currency, and the blockchain technology is going to be used. Right? I'm not sure about the connection between this announcement and the trade tensions between U.S. and China. In terms of the trade tension, I think it has been quite moderated over the last several weeks after the 13th dialogue, right? So the 13th talk has reached some temporary agreement, and hopefully next month the two presidents are going to meet in Chile to finalize the agreement. I think that's a very good development.
Professor Jun Qian, we are talking about why President Xi Jinping emphasized the importance of blockchain, and with that we have to focus on the importance of cryptocurrency, the issue of digital currencies, as opposed to Libra that was advocated by Facebook. Mm-hmm. How important is the issue of decentralization? Why do you think central bank, against the background of decentralization, also agrees to consider seriously the issue of digital currency?
Sure. So I guess one of the reasons that we already talked about is lower transaction costs. There are lots of problems with the traditional currency system or means of exchange. If there are ways that clearly you can lower the transaction cost of a lot of transactions, and certainly digital currency is an important way that we can further lower transaction costs. And on top of that, as I think Paul described it very nicely, that this currency is helped by the technology of blockchain. And one of the most important thing is basically because all the transactions are recorded on all the terminals, it's actually very, very, very hard for anybody to alter any actual transaction records. So it's very, very hard to counterfeiting. So and that obviously is very important because when people and machines are executing trades and transactions at very high speed, the last thing they need to worry about is trusting the system. So in the back of everybody's mind, if the system itself is not only fast but very secure, that's tremendous. It not only boosts the speed, it basically, and we've already talked about there are a lot of applications of this technology. It really can enhance the efficiency of the entire system, and by that I don't mean just the financial system, because we've already seen blockchain technology has been used in tracking shipping goods, insurance contracts, and so forth.
Honestly, discussions have broken out on social media, not only about the role the government plays in shaping the relationship between market and the government, but also about, for example, the use of cryptocurrency and blockchain, focusing on, for example, whether the importance of a non-public sector economy, SMEs, will be marginalized. And there are allegedly suspicions that whenever the central authorities decide to step in, there will be more troubles. I mean, this is a very strong, cynical voice. It may not necessarily be the case, but you have to admit there is such a strong skeptical voice coming from the grassroots, from the local economic players and entities, that when the central bank starts to talk smart about blockchain, there will be more risks than finding a solution. What do you think of such a skeptical attitude? Jun Chan?
I actually don't think here that argument is well grounded. You know, look, I teach finance. I'm an advocate for markets. The idea is that if the markets are built, if the markets are functioning, the markets can take care of a lot of things. What the government's role in this kind of system is, one, to help promote a healthier and more efficient markets, and two, protect the rule and integrity of the markets. So in this argument that we've talked about, the idea of a digital currency with this blockchain technology is to enhance the speed and efficiency and also enhance the security of the system. So if anything, it should really help everybody, including the SMEs. The other point I would add is that with fintech, one of the best applications of fintech in China is precisely because companies like Alibaba and Ant Financial, with all their payment data, they are able to better access risks of small businesses, and they've been starting to make loans to these small businesses that are otherwise shut out of the traditional financial system. So I actually see this digital currency being proposed to be issued by the central bank is to be able to make that system more efficient.
Thank you very much. That's Professor Jun Chan from Fudan University in Shanghai. Paul, let's talk broadly about the prospects. As China is making historic strides to increase foreign access to its local markets and further liberalize financial markets, what kind of lessons and experiences shall be learned from advanced economies and against the background of, for example, digital technology?
Well, I think one of the great concerns about digital currencies will be how they can be regulated. And that's, I think, a concern that we're seeing in the U.S. because there have been rules that largely came out of the U.S., so many of them after the 9/11 terrorist event, to carefully monitor the flows of cash to make sure that money does not go to terrorists. And if you want to make a large bank transfer now, you have to ask a lot. You're asked and have to answer a lot of questions about how things are done. That might be circumvented with a digital currency, and so I think there'll be concerns about that. In China shut down the use of Bitcoin a couple of years ago because of widespread concerns that Bitcoin was being used to evade China's currency controls. And that's something that will have to be factored into any system that's developed for China.
Yao Yang, what do you think of the lessons and inspirations we can draw from Wall Street?
Well, look, we live in the real world. We don't live in a digital world. I think we have to face real challenges China has today, right? The fundamental challenge for Chinese financial regulators is how to simultaneously stabilize the market, but in the meantime, to give financial institutions some freedom to do more business. I think that's the fundamental challenge. I'm not sure that digital currency is going to solve this problem. It's not, to me, I don't think it's going to solve this problem. If anything we can learn from the Wall Street, that is, you're not going to allow the market to add a lot of leverage forever, right? But in the meantime, you have to allow the market to do some financial innovation.
The invisible hand of the market has got to enjoy some margin for the maneuvers. That's basically the point that Professor Yao Yang is making here. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.